Seema, welcome to Brown Game Strong.
Thank you so much, Mithali, for having me.
It's an absolute just glory to have you today. You have been somebody that I followed since I think probably came across your page during lockdown, which I think a lot of people did in the confines of our homes. And I would like you to first, I guess, tell us about what it is you do and I guess, yeah, who you are. So a little introduction, please.
So, my background is that I'm a storyteller. I'm actually what they call a narrative practitioner, which means that I work across the spectrum of narrative. How to tell a story, how to listen to a story, because listening to stories is an equal skill, which people don't understand. And just understanding how stories are created and how they're put out, because stories are the most powerful tool of influence. They define our identities, they create the narrative that we live within. And people don't understand, they don't realize the power that is behind a story. And so for me, stories are extremely important, and that's what I've always worked with. That's my background. I am currently known for my work in the erotic literatures of ancient India. And this is something I started doing about 23 years ago. I started working on understanding what are the stories that we had shut down. Because in all of the stories that we tell of how a woman should behave, what is a woman's role, where she should exist and how, at what age, how she should exist, the one thing that we never talk about is a woman's right to her own body. Her body is somebody else's property. Her pleasure, she needs somebody else's permission for that. And I'd sort of started to wonder where those stories were that we had shut down, because we're the land that wrote the Kama Sutra. How is it that we didn't have any of these stories? And like everybody else, I mean, we didn't grow up learning about the Kama Sutra. I had no idea what the Kama Sutra was about when I was growing up. Like everyone else, I thought it was a book on positions. And it was only when I started to study it that I realized what it is. But even thinking it was just a book on positions, I figured there must be more narrative on pleasure that we haven't talked about. And that's what actually made me go into these texts. I always say I started by saying that I was going to do like a little 5,000 word essay and kind of move on from there. And it's now been 23 years. And I think that I am just totally like, I've sunk into this narrative because it is so vast and it's so incredible. And there's so much more to it than I would ever have believed possible. And so, yeah, here I am.
23 years.
23 years.
In these years, what have you learnt about yourself?
Do you know what? The first thing that I learned, which was the turning point for me, like everybody else from my generation, and even maybe the generations that followed, a woman's pleasure was never talked about. We were told when we were younger that a woman who has sex, well, you have to wait till you're married. Once you're married, you're supposed to have sex to make your husband happy. But a woman who enjoys sex is fast, meaning you're a slut. That was the term used. So I also grew up thinking of this as not a good thing. Like, that's an inherent thing that's put into your brain. The next thing was that when you do find yourself in that moment of pleasure, whether, this is you're going out with somebody, you kiss, you make out, you find yourself feeling pleasured, there's that guilt that is in your head.
Yeah.
It pulls you back. Then there is also this thing about the importance of the man's pleasure and the dismissive attitude towards a woman's pleasure. So automatically, if you wanted more, you believed that you were a slut, and the other person equally is listening to the same narrative. They also believed that this was not necessary. And I still remember as a very young person, when I say very young, in my early 20s, going out with someone. And I remember this guy kissing me, and I remember wanting more. It wasn't enough. Like, I wanted more. And I remember him saying to me, you're just being too demanding. And I realized this, that, I mean, this happened with a couple of guys. And then you suddenly realize, hmm, clearly this is chasing away the men.
Yeah.
If I'm too demanding, I need to hold myself back. So you suppress your own sexuality, you suppress your pleasure to make yourself acceptable. Because you have to remember, today I'm 61. I have learned over many, many, many decades that I am fighting for a particular right. And that's fine to have that fight. But when you're that young, when you're 21, you don't know that. You know, none of us know this. And there isn't a precedent that's saying you need to go out there and fight for this. You know?
Yeah.
When I think about the feminist movement when it started in America, that only started in the late 60s, at a time when there was no social media, there was very little television. You didn't know, living in India, what was happening in America. You didn't know about the movement. You had to discover a lot of this for yourself. So, yeah, I grew up with this belief that something is not right with me, because either I wanted too much, or if it wasn't, in inverted commas, too much, or if I wasn't getting aroused when I'm supposed to with my husband, then clearly something is wrong with me because I'm not getting aroused enough. This, you know, and no matter how well you do in the rest of your life, you can be amazing at studying, you can be incredible at your work, you can be the ultimate success in every part of your life, but this is one area where your confidence is zilch, and you're kept at that point where your confidence is zilch. So I believed I was frigid, and I believed that I wasn't good enough, till I think after I started to study these texts, you come to that understanding of, actually, this is how it's meant to be. It was meant to be like this. I'm okay. And you're not going to believe this, Mithali, but, and this is seriously, I'm not being dramatic. The day that realization dawned, you can't imagine the sense of empowerment that I felt. Just knowing I'm okay. There's nothing wrong with me.
I think my natural next question is, obviously you've studied all these ancient scriptures, you've looked at the Kama Sutra in depth, among many other stories, etc. And my understanding, my very limited understanding, is that at that time, our sensuality was something to be celebrated. It was, men, women. Was it? That's my first question, I guess.
So there is an equal number of texts that talk about reining the woman in, but there was a general understanding at that time of the importance of sensuality.
Yeah.
This is at a time, you have to remember, this is written, we don't have an exact date for the Kama Sutra, but it's written in approximately the 4th century AD. And Vatsyayan, the author of the Kama Sutra, says that the material that he's written in there is not original, that he's copied and pasted stuff from books written about 1,000 years before that.
Okay.
So we know that through those 1,000 years before that, this is when the Buddhists are more in control of India. It's around the 5th century that the Brahmins start to come back into India, and the control then shifts when it comes to the religious controls. So we understand that around the 4th century, around the 5th century, sex work is legal. There's a ministry for it. And it's considered very important because in those days, again, men would travel from one land to the other. And it was important that they had this for their stress relief, for their happiness, for their several other reasons. So they could see the importance of it. And for the courtesans, there was not just, these weren't just brothels. Courtesans were taught at great length what seduction meant, how to execute positions. Men were taught, young men were taught how to appreciate seduction and what was their role in seduction. And I think that's what makes me realize how far we have regressed, because we don't talk about seduction. What I love about the text is the beauty with which it talks about the subject. it's not just about, yeah, it's a good thing. It's okay to have sex.
Yeah.
It actually changes. It changes where your brain is
Mm.
when it talks about seduction.
Mm.
It changes that space, that vocabulary. It gives you that feeling that this is one of the most beautiful, exciting, energizing things that you could do.
Mm.
That's what is so amazing. So it's not just that, yep, it's a good thing. It's not just, yep, it's a good thing for a man, hence the woman must fall into place. The Kama Sutra makes it very clear that any kind of physical relationship between two people depends on how much pleasure the woman is getting.
Mm.
That decides the longevity
Mm.
or the success of that particular physical connection.
Okay.
It goes so far as to say that the balance of the universe depends on the pleasure of the woman.
Mm.
And I love the fact that they thought of it in such different ways. I mean, the idea, I don't know how much you studied the history of the Puritans, for instance, but early 1900s in America, it was forbidden for an unmarried woman to wear perfume. It was considered loose morals. Because you're
Arousing.
arousing.
Mm.
We are talking 2000 years ago of this entire regime of perfuming for the simple reason, for the main purpose of arousal,
Mm.
not just for your partner, but for yourself as well. Every part of the body had to be fragranced with a different perfume. Every perfume kind of has a purpose to it. If there's a very small area of your body, like your belly button, it needed something really strong
Mm.
to draw somebody there. You know, it's like a little, almost like signs on the road, like, you know, go left, go right.
Mm.
If it's a larger area, it was a more subtle perfume so that you'd have to press your face into that part of the body to get that. The idea was to build connection, to build intimacy, to build excitement.
Mm.
And in case you're zoning out, like most of us do if you have a long-term partner and you're kissing them in exactly the same way every day, when you're starting to zone out, you go to a different perfume, you come back to the present,
Mm.
you know? And I just love the amount of time and effort and thought that went into this whole idea of pleasure.
Mm.
Pleasure being a beautiful thing.
Mm. It's interesting to me how, it was such an empowering thing. Pleasure, sensuality, arousal, not just for your partner, but for yourself. When did that shift happen where it suddenly became a thing of shame? Where did the shift happen where suddenly it was about, oh, like if you're wearing certain clothes, you're, considered a certain way and not in a good way?
Yeah.
What was that point? Is there a point where it shifted?
I think not that I know of, but I think these shifts of narrative take place as society evolves.
Yeah.
It's bound to. So the Kama Sutra, for instance, I always say to people, it's not just the one text. It's several thousand texts.
Mm.
Every king in every kingdom, whoever came to the throne, had it rewritten. And they're called commentaries as opposed to translations. Because everybody added a little bit of something, they changed a little bit of something, they talked about it. So some of the commentaries are more well known, some have kind of died a natural death. But for instance, the Kama Sutra, which is again, like I said, written 300 and something AD, talks about the man and the woman as the man and the woman. The 12th century rewrite or the 13th century rewrite talks about husband and wife.
Okay.
So they've already shifted. Morality has shifted.
Yeah.
Now you're talking about pleasure. It's no longer just that you're a woman, you should be having this pleasure. You're the wife.
Yeah. You
So-
have to be married. To have sex.
That it's already shifted. That this is what you should be doing with your wife or with your husband. So I can't really say when the whole thing shifted. I know that we have a very definite change in attitudes, of course, with the imperial rule, when the British are in India. But it had started a long time before that. So with the Mughals, for instance, the harems had come in.
Mm.
And it wasn't just the Mughal emperors, there was as much the Indian kings, the Hindu kings who had their harems. And already the woman is now property. She's over there. She gets to be picked when she is needed.
Mm.
It's no longer about her pleasure. Things have changed. We talk about in the original, when I say the original Kama Sutra, there's no such thing as the original, but you know what I mean, like Vatsyayan's Kama Sutra. There's this chapter on alankar. Alankar literally means ornamentation.
Mm.
And there is this chapter, which is in one of the 11th century translations, actually, which talks about several different things that make you beautiful.
Mm.
And one of them is that if your lover has arrived a little earlier than you expected, and you get all flustered and frazzled, and you run out to meet him, and you've got one eye done with eyeliner, and you haven't put the other one on, and your hair is all disheveled, and instead of wearing your necklace around here, you've by mistake worn it around your waist, and you put your anklet on your wrist, and so on, and you've kind of gone out because you're so excited to see him, but flustered and not fully dressed. And it says that a man seeing his beloved in this state of being flustered is so fortunate
Mm.
because he knows how much you love him.
Mm.
Now, clearly, that's not, I mean, if you go to a party looking like that, that's not going to be brilliant ornamentation. So, you know what I mean. But the idea that beauty was supposed to be mobility, it was independence. A woman playing with the ball. There's a whole routine of a woman playing with the ball, which is considered the sexiest thing that you could do. It is part of the dance form called the Mohiniyattam. And, you would sort of fling the ball up and it would make your cheeks all glowy with perspiration and your palms would go red. And all of this was very, very sexy.
Mm.
And in our ancient plays, in our literature, whenever a woman plays with a ball like this, it's always followed by a really steamy sex scene.
Mm.
So, when it talks about the makeup for your eyes are not because you've got your false lashes on and you've got your eyeliner on and you've got all your makeup on, so much eyeshadow, and that's what makes them beautiful. No, it was about how you moved your eyes. Your eyes, it says, were supposed to be like dance masters making the lover dance to their tune.
Mm.
So it's all about the beauty of the eyes is described in how quickly you can move your eyes around. What can you do with literally the language of the eyes. We get to the point of, let's say, the colonial rule, where women have now been put into a certain box.
Mm.
It's how beautiful you can look with how much makeup you have, plus how much jewelry you've got on. And there are stories of, when the British were ruling India, obviously a lot of the kingdoms, the princes and the kings had their money, but they no longer had any power. And so the idea was indulgence. You bought more beautiful things. And at state occasions, women would be wearing so much jewelry that they couldn't stand on their own. They would need help to even stand up.
Wow.
And to me, this is, a woman who cannot stand up by herself, you have taken away every little bit of her independence,
Yeah.
her agency, her autonomy to be who she is. Her beauty now depends on how wealthy her husband is, how much jewelry she's got on, and how much makeup she's got on.
Mm.
So you've changed the vocabulary completely.
Shifting that onto the modern day and age, we're in a world of female empowerment, and it is the age of the woman working and taking control of her life and independence, and choosing to have sex outside marriage or even outside a monogamous relationship. What has been, I guess, the biggest shift, would you say, in the way that women now generally approach their sensuality? Do you feel like it's changed much in terms of the way we ourselves perceive sex and our own sensuality?
I see that there's a huge shift in women wanting to make that shift.
Yeah, I agree.
I think that getting there is going to take time. It won't happen overnight. But women really want to do it. And I think one of the things has been education and financial independence, which has given them the right to know that they can. Think about a woman's role. Even when I got married, a lot of my peer group, a lot of the women in my time, yes, they all went to university with me. We all studied, but that studying was not for them to be independent. Their studies were to make them a more desirable wife to have. Like, ooh, I'm married to this educated girl. Do you know, I have a really good friend from school days, and she once said to me with great pride, and this was like 2 years ago, she said, my husband is wonderful. He lets me do anything I want. The only thing he's ever said is, you're not allowed to work. And she said, my son has just got married, and he said the same thing to his wife. You can do anything you want, but you're not allowed to work. So that narrative hasn't fully shifted. There's still a lot of women, a lot of young women who are being told, yes, you can do anything you want, but you can't work.
Yeah.
And there is still a little fight over there for it. But yeah, I think primarily young ladies, young women, girls have now come to believe that they have the capability to change their lives if they can be educated and if they can be financially independent. And I think that gives them the power to choose, because literally that's all you want. It could be that your husband doesn't want you to work after you get married, and you're happy to say, okay, I will do as you wish. But it should be a choice that she also has a right to make.
Yeah.
And I think that's where it is. And then the moment you realize that you can have agency, you can have an identity of your own, the next thing that shifts is your idea of your own sensuality. We, of course, as a society today, are doing our best to talk about women's pleasure. There is, if you've noticed, most of the sexual health educators are actually women.
It's
I
true.
wish more men would step into that role for guys. Guys don't have this kind of role model to look up to. At least in India, there are very few men who talk on the subject. And the guys who do, I mean, they're either stand-up comics. And there's one that somebody pointed me in the direction of recently, who basically is not a sexual health educator. He abuses the other guys for writing in, and he makes fun of them. And the audience over there think that's really funny, because for some reason, abuse has become funny. So there is also that. Now, what is happening, of course, is that women are being able to explore their sexuality, their sensuality. And that is also, I think, making the larger audience around them nervous. Because I always think that when you're able to tell your own story, when you're able to feel pleasure, when you're able to choose to feel pleasure in the way that you feel pleasure, that makes you an independent human being.
It also makes you a threat.
It makes you a threat, of course, but it makes you, that's the one thing that makes you a person. If you're being controlled on, yes, fine, you go out and earn, you can spend on anything you want, you can do all of that. All that is great. It's wonderful. That's necessary. But it's only when you have the right to your own pleasure that you become a truly independent person.
For any women who may be listening who don't necessarily have that autonomy because they are either in environments where they're being kind of, told what to do, dare I say, oppressed, how would they, in their own way, be able to reclaim this part of their lives without putting themselves at danger?
Yes, this is the first thing that we always have to say, is that we don't say to people that, okay, you're in a relationship, you're in a marriage, let's say, where your husband and the other family members around you are not comfortable or okay with you to do a particular thing. How do you actually manage to stand up for yourself, and how do you do this while keeping yourself safe? And I think that's very important. And I think that there is no one way forward. Everybody has their own way of looking at things, or everybody, let's rephrase that. Everybody has their own understanding of what is the circumstances around them and what will be safe for them and what puts them into danger. The only thing that I can say is that the first shift has to happen here in your head. And it has to be little tiny steps forward.
Mm.
You don't have to do anything with it. You just have to open up that area in your brain that says, pleasure is okay. It's a good thing to have. And I deserve it. I'm worthy of it.
Mm.
I, I'm not going to actually say what you could do to go forward, because like I said, in every situation, that is different. And
Yeah.
I don't want to put this on anybody saying, you should do this and then find themselves in a problem. Whatever it is that you're comfortable to do, but the first thing is in your head that it's okay, because
Mm.
that's where our biggest blockage is actually, and that's where it has to be opened up first. Because I think once you find that you are okay to do it, you will find a way to do it.
Mm.
I had this guy write into me the other day saying, my wife dresses in a way that I just don't like, and we're having a lot of fights over it. Tell me, how can I control her? And I was thinking, okay, once again, I have no idea how your wife is dressing, number one. But I also know that almost everything these days becomes a problem. I talked the other day about, if a girl wears something sexy and goes out onto the street, it doesn't mean you can go and rape her or assault her. That doesn't give you the right to do it. And you wouldn't believe the number of people abusing me on that, or the number of people arguing about why she should be wearing such sexy clothes, or who gave her the right to. And fine, if she wants to go out naked, we're not talking about nakedness.
Mm.
We're talking about literally anything that she chooses to wear. And then there was this one guy who actually wrote in saying, um, women are using their clothes to look sexy. They're using the sari to look very sexy.
Mm.
Personally, I think that girls should be dressed in kurtis, because that is the most modest thing to wear. And I was thinking, wow. Instead of
Mm.
saying, yeah, we need to understand that no matter what you think somebody else is wearing, you are your own responsibility. We're actually now going to a point where it's like, the sari is too sexy, you can't wear it. Sorry, you and I would be so
Yeah,
out of
we'd
place.
be lost. Yeah.
Yeah. How
It's
dare we be wearing
How
saris?
dare we? It's very interesting. I have a couple of thoughts that spring to mind. One being the definition of sexy, right? Because different people find different clothes sexy. Some people find like the idea of a woman being fully clothed quite sexy, because it's like, oh, it's quite,
Yeah.
interesting, like what's underneath that, I guess. Some people find short skirts and that kind of thing, midriff, sexy. Um, I grew up in Spain, where you have women just sunbathing topless on the beach. And what I found growing up there was the idea of, sex and your sensuality. It felt a lot less taboo, a lot more normalized. People were just a lot more just comfortable with their bodies and the idea of sex, as opposed to having a very Indian upbringing, going back to India, being told to cover up because I don't want men to look at me funny. I was told that from a very young age. I want to explore that a little more, because that started shifting my own perception of what sexy means when it comes to me. And oh gosh, if I show anything above my knees, I'm now provoking men, and I may be a slut.
Mm.
What the hell is that about? And how can we protect our girls specifically from, I guess, seeing themselves in that shameful way? Because I've had to do years of unlearning to get over that.
So I think one of the biggest problems, okay, when you talk about somebody being old enough to be on a beach, make her own decision, even if it's here, let's say in Europe, um, being old enough to say, well, I'm going to be on a beach, I'm going to be topless, I shall bathe, I shall sunbathe, I'm okay. As you know, there isn't there isn't a lack of taboo around short clothes over here either. There isn't a lack of stigma around short clothes over here either, unfortunately.
Yeah.
You get a certain category of people everywhere. Maybe there's just more of them in one place and less in another.
Yeah.
But I find that the first idea of being sexy starts far before you have actually got the maturity to understand it. So you're a young person, let's say you're a 12-year-old girl, you're at school. What is pop culture throwing at you? They're throwing one idea of sexy at you. They're telling you sexy is something short, revealing, tight, etc. There's a particular image.
Yeah.
And it's being taught not just to the girls, it's being taught to the boys as well. That's what they're showing. So everybody's going back with this idea that is what is sexy. We don't have an alternative narrative. If pop culture showed somebody in a pair of jeans and a baggy t-shirt as one option of sexy, or I don't know, somebody in a loose muslin dress, flowy dress as one option of sexy. Somebody showed you as wearing a sari as one option of sexy. You had 5 different options of sexy. You would choose what made you feel comfortable.
You would.
We only get the one option. So even if you're not comfortable wearing those clothes, you end up wearing that because you're like, but I'm going out with my friends to this nightclub. I want to look sexy. So I think this is one of our biggest problems, is that this is all we're teaching. And then we're like, but why are you wearing those clothes? Because think about it, like nobody wants to deliberately be dowdy. You know, if I said wearing a patiala salwar with a really short kurta, I think it's so sexy. It's so sensuous.
Yeah.
Really, it is. With a long plait with your parandi in it. Oh my God, it is so gorgeous. But if that's dowdy according to people, then what you're doing is, even though that's what I really want to wear, I don't want to look dowdy, so I'm going to wear what you wear because I want to look good. So one is you're giving an incomplete narrative to everybody. The second thing is, when we actually talk about how whatever a woman wears is nothing to do with whether she's asking for it or not.
Yes.
It's got nothing to do with her character. It's got nothing to do with anything, actually. It's just what is her choice to wear. I think because the narrative has been around for so long that change is never easy. So although women will see that as change, that, yeah, I'm going to wear whatever I want to because it has nothing to do with my desire to have sex with you or to provoke you or whatever. It's a change that we want to make. Hence, we are prepared to embrace that change. If there is a certain category of men out there who have always thought, well, this gives me the right over this woman, why would they want to make that change? They're not going to want to. Hence the fight that we see right now. And it's a pretty vicious fight that's going on. If you look at some of my reels where I've actually talked about this, you should just hear some of the stuff that guys will come across. And you know, their reaction is like, not even, okay, I understand that if a woman comes like, how dare she? And then it's like, fine, let her be naked for all I care. Like, nobody's talking about nakedness. And finally, it's them saying, it's my fault. How dare I be saying to women that it's okay for them to dress a certain way? You are ruining the next generation.
Spoiling them, Seema.
I'm spoiling them. I'm doing a mass spoil out. Yeah, so there's a lot of resistance to change because it means that you have to shift that responsibility from, it was your responsibility, you wore that, hence I behaved like this with you, to saying, it's now my responsibility how I behave. Bloody hell. Where are you going to go? What's easier? You know, I just want to tell you, this reminds me, there's, so the erotic texts come from every single ancient culture, not just Indian. And the Chinese have the erotic texts as well. It's just that the Chinese ones are more male focused, but there's enough sort of overlap with what the Kama Sutra says. And there's a lot of texts around the Yellow Emperor. We don't know if he was a mythical figure or whatever, but he's supposed to have lived 5,000 years ago. And they say that he had about 1,200 women in his harem. And he used to have sex with 120 of them every night.
What?
Yeah. Okay. So just to give you a background. And hence, because they believe that sex or certain types of sexual activity increases your virility. It depicts your virility. It makes you stronger. It's beneficial health-wise for you. So it was important to have that sex. Okay, so there was a time set for that. But obviously, you cannot have sex with 120 women. So there were many things that you had to learn to do. So how you use your fingers on some, how you use your penis on some, how you use toys on some, etc. And at one point, so there's a chunk of it called the Yellow Emperor's Basic Questions. And he says at one point, he says, but if I have to have sex with 6 women, let's say, or 10, penetrative sex, how do I not ejaculate?
Yeah.
Okay. So how do I hold that? Assuming that when you hold on to your ejaculate, that you can become hard quicker again.
Okay.
And the person advising him says, because men were taught how to have sex by describing different battle positions to them, because it was said that that's the vocabulary a man understood.
I've heard that before.
Yeah. So he says, well, in battle, when you meet an opponent, it's not easy to kill another human being, but you psych yourself up. You say, he's ugly, he's vicious, he's mean, he's cruel, he's whatever. Think hideous things about them. Think good things about yourself, and then go in for the kill. In the same way, in the general space of things, you would say, well, I'm with a partner, I'm about to ejaculate. I will now think, she's hideous, she's ugly, and so on. Yeah, this is what the Chinese, the Taoist principles are. She's hideous, she's ugly, and that stops you from ejaculating. But if there is more at stake, like you literally have to hold on even more, because that may not necessarily work. You may be too far gone. He says, imagine you are in battle, you're on a horse, and the reins that's holding the horse are rotten, so you cannot control the horse. But underneath is a huge precipice. Now, your life is at stake. You will figure out a way to control that horse.
Yeah.
You will. We don't feel that when it comes to sex, it is important to bring the same level of responsibility, effort, and teaching into it.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. And I just love this particular story because it's like, yeah, you would do that if you felt your life was at stake.
Yeah. Do you not feel like, I mean, it's a great segue into modern day dating, because do you not feel like sex is just this thing now with obviously online like dating apps, etc., that's almost, there's a perception that it's just available at your request, like whenever you want it. But also you hear increasingly, I mean, I'm sure you get a lot of questions around this, but the quality of it seems to have gone down. So what are your thoughts on just how, I guess, the younger generation, or even just anyone alive today, is having sex, given that we've got all of these options and everything's so instant nowadays?
So I think, one, I really do believe that the younger generation is not having that much sex. I think they're having far less sex than people think they are, because, I mean, I'm just going by how many people think I'm having how many affairs. Okay? So I'm having so many affairs according to them.
You're just so busy.
I'm so busy. I don't know how I have time to eat my meals. Really, there's no time. I mean, if I'm sleeping with about 12 men every day, 15 maybe, I have no time to bathe, change.
Yeah, how are you even here?
I don't know how I'm here. Really, this is taking up my time. Sorry, I need to get back to more important things. But yeah, I really don't think that the younger generation are having that much sex. I think that the other thing is that they are understanding what they really want in sex. Sex is not something that, it's just like you can't learn driving from watching Fast and Furious. You cannot learn how to have sex from watching porn or from imagining what you're going to do. You learn about sex from having sex. If you're with a partner who's really enjoying it and you understand what you enjoy and you have the ability to communicate with each other, even if it is a date on Hinge or Bumble or whatever, even if it's a date, you've come together for the express purpose of dating. Maybe you're looking for a longer relationship, but you know what I mean? Like, you have come, as both people, the man and the woman, have come into this from a point of agency.
Mm.
You have the power to say, I would like to date.
Yeah.
And so you can have that conversation about what you would like or not like. And I personally think that that improves the quality of sex. And when people say it's not as good as it used to be, people have no idea what it used to be. Most women back then, I mean, forget women, men and women were not taught how to have sex.
Mm.
Trust me. I know, I talk to a lot of women of my age. Most of them will say to me, oh, I no longer have to have sex. Yay. Because honestly, I've had conversations where I've said, why are you so happy? Like, I understand you don't want to, but why was it so bad that you're so thrilled?
Yeah.
And these are people in really good marriages, let me tell you.
Okay.
Brilliant marriages, compatibility is there. There's love, there's caring. But clearly the sex was really bad.
Mm.
And it was because nobody was taught what was good sex or how important good sex was, or even how important it was for a woman to be able to understand what made her happy in sex.
Yeah.
So I'm sorry, but sex wasn't great earlier. Maybe it was so good in the time of the Kama Sutra because they spent so much time explaining how it should be done or understanding the importance of the little nuances.
Yeah.
When was the last time somebody said that to, let's say, your mom's generation?
Mm.
Would you really say that they had better sex? No, I'm sorry. Trust me on this one.
Yeah.
And I will also say this for people who are in their 40s. I would say this for almost everybody gone before this particular generation, because I've also noticed that as women, for instance, we talk a lot to our girlfriends.
Mm.
We will talk to them about our sex lives. Very few people talk to their partners about it.
Yeah. Okay.
They don't discuss what they like or they don't like when it comes to their partner. There is so much hesitance. There's so much shame.
Yeah. Or like
About
embarrassment.
Yeah,
right?
embarrassment about saying, no, kiss me here rather than there. You know what? On a personal level, for the longest time, I absolutely hate being kissed in my ear, for anybody who's interested. It took me years to tell my husband I did not like it.
Okay.
It took me years to say to him, don't kiss me in the ear. I really don't like it. Because again, we all come with a certain preconception of what is good sex. He's been taught, like most men, the woman should be kissed all over. This is what all, and yeah, I'm sorry, I hate the ear. But a lot of people just never get around to saying it.
No.
I get messages from women saying, I just kind of say, oh, okay, and do it.
Or there's an expectation for your partner to just know.
Yeah.
Like, I've been with this person for so long, they should just know what I like, what I don't like. They should read my mind.
Yeah.
And then there's also this thing of women faking it, which obviously is such a big topic in itself. But it's not just like faking orgasms. It's also just faking every part of it, really.
Absolutely.
Because you're like, that's kind of what is expected in porn. And that's what you hear when you watch porn.
Yeah.
So I guess, how has the porn industry, ruined us when it comes to sex?
Okay. Most people forget that porn is visual. It's a film. They've
or,
got
or a book.
Or a book.
Yeah.
But I mean, let's say the pornography on this thing. Because when you're reading a book, you can kind of understand, visualize things in your mind according to how you like things. So you fit yourself into that character. So you can still get there. When you're watching porn, that's where the biggest issue is. And they have what we call the money shots. So they have a couple of things which are the money shots. One of them is if the woman is on top, she's bouncing up and down. I mean, the amount of bouncing that these women have to do. Now,
and they're enjoying every bounce.
Yeah, they're enjoying every bounce. And now you say to a guy in real life that actually, when in the situation of being penetrated, when a woman bounces up and down, if she's on top, that organ, the penis, is missing every point that is arousing. It's not really doing anything.
Yeah.
But it's shown as, head thrown back, boobs bouncing up and down,
Yeah.
cheese jumping up and down. It's really bad for your knees, let me tell you. I mean, just putting it out there. It is really bad for your knees. But I just think it's so bizarre, but people are going to believe it because that's what they're watching. And the filmmakers are going to do it because that's the money shot. They've got to show something that is happening. It's got to be visual. The other thing that's the money shot is the man ejaculating everywhere, like the spray of ejaculate that comes out when he comes. And, you know, there are a few women that would like to try out the, you know, being like having the cum on their face or whatever. Most women don't.
Yeah.
Most women don't enjoy being sprayed with ejaculate. They might try it once or twice. And yet, like I said, you know, honestly, with the surveys that have been done, most women really don't find any pleasure in that. Most guys aren't able to do that. And most guys don't want to be walking around with their penis in their hand like a hose pipe, spraying it everywhere. It's really not.
Yeah.
And yet, this is what porn is showing. And this is what people are still believing is the idea of pleasure.
Yeah.
Because films have to show a particular thing. Showing something really gentle and sweet is not going to sell the film. And so I just don't know who it's actually helping, except that it's sort of screwing up everybody's mind and they're thinking, this is what we need to be doing.
Yeah. And I guess it's also creating that need to keep watching it because ultimately it's the views that they're going for.
Absolutely.
That's how they make the money, right? I want to talk about a little bit something that we discussed prior to recording, which was this idea of, you know, maybe off the back of porn, women wanting a certain type of man.
Partner.
Yeah, a certain type of partner, let's say. You know, like that bad boy image.
The bad boy.
Can we talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. You know, it's funny. This has been around for a long time. And I think pop culture is totally to blame for this idea of the bad boy. I'm amazed at how many women of my age will still say, oh, but I like the bad boys. And like, are you out of your bloody minds? You know, only because it's what we've been fed. And a lot of these, I'm saying women of my age because a lot of them have tried going out with these guys and it's been horrible. But you keep going back to that idea because everybody else says, oh, like the bad boys, without understanding it. Once again, it's not their fault. It's what popular media has fed us.
Yeah.
Okay, so we have come to understand from pop culture this very romanticized image of the bad boy.
Yeah.
Not just Bollywood, Hollywood, equally, everywhere. So this is somebody who's, I don't know, good looking. He rides either a fast car or a fast motorbike. Hair flying in the wind. He's got this daredevil attitude, you know, he can kind of do anything. And yet, he is, you know, so he's the kind who can go into any kind of bar and pick up a fight with somebody. And if you're his girl, then he's going to pick up a fight for you. And he's great at gambling and he's great at any kind of physical sport. And he's, with all of that still, he's also the perfect gentleman. You know, he'll love you tenderly. He's a brilliant lover. I don't know where any of this crap comes from, but literally everything that we think in our minds, like what we fantasize about, is in this bad boy. Now, primarily what I found with a lot of the so-called bad boys, this need to be this person who is front and center everywhere. He's the kind of guy that all the women love and all the guys want to be his friends. You know, he's that kind of popular guy. Anybody who is in that kind of front and center, I'm ready to pick a fight, I'm ready to go gamble, I'm ready to go and ride fast cars and motorbikes, you know, where they're not supposed to be. A lot of it depends very much on how much time they spend on their self. There is a certain ego factor that comes in. And that totally makes them somebody that wants to be loved and wants to be looked up to. They don't have time for you and your needs and your whatever special gentleness that you think it's coming from.
Mm.
You have to remember that guys are also human beings. They don't have the ability to encompass all of this into one, because that's like a perfect creation.
Yeah, they would not be human.
They would not be human.
Yeah.
And just like I don't think any of us could be that perfect. So it is literally that sort of the male Barbie version. You know, you're sweet, you're gentle, but you're rough and this thing. And also this thing that a lot of women will come down to, yeah, you know, if I'm his girlfriend, he'll pick up a fight for me. If you have in real life ever been with a guy who has started to get into fights, into fisticuffs, it is the most frightening experience.
Yeah.
It is horrible.
Yeah.
And you don't want to be over there. You're going to be scarred for life.
But also, if they're capable of doing that to somebody else, they're capable of doing that to anybody,
Absolutely.
including to you.
Absolutely. And this idea that if some other guy even looks at my girl, I'm going to punch them up.
Yeah.
Can you imagine what kind of toxic jealousy that is going to lead to? That you are my property. Nobody gets to look at you. You know, if I remember having this conversation many years ago with my cousin, talking about the fact that when she was saying that when they go out as a couple, she said, you know, I expect other women to look at my husband and say, oh, he's gorgeous. Because if nobody else thinks he's gorgeous, where am I going to find that gorgeousness from? So feel happy in the fact that other people think you're amazing. So long as you have that relationship with each other, that's where it counts. That has to be built up. Honestly, what you really want is somebody who respects you, somebody who you can have a conversation with, someone when you know that you need to turn to them, you can turn to them, but also somebody who shares in your interests. So if you say, okay, I want to go skiing, somebody, even if they don't know how to ski, okay, let's try it. Or I want to go trekking, or I want to go row a boat, or whatever. You know, somebody will say, let's go try this for fun. Nobody's looking for a superhero. Really, there are very few Clark Kents around, you know, and he was not from planet Earth anyway.
That's true.
That should give you a little background on how crazy it is that we actually think that. The other problem following on from this jealousy angle that, you know, you're mine and I will protect you and I will, it is such a toxic idea. And again, it's been romanticized where the guy is jealousy. So if a woman is jealous, she's just a nag and she's ridiculous. A guy's jealousy has been romanticized. And hence the violence that can follow it has been romanticized. You know, the guy who says, I'll kill myself if you leave me.
Gosh, yeah.
It is so toxic.
Yeah. And I think having seen that in popular culture and media, I mean, I grew up on Bollywood films. That was like the biggest thing, you know, Shah Rukh Khan, like pining over his female leads and that kind of thing. And it was just so normalized. And I remember there was this film that came out with Shahid Kapoor, which was called Kabir Singh.
Oh,
which,
God,
yes, I mean, whole other podcast probably.
Oh, God.
Because that I think in itself sparked up so much conversation around this like idea of like macho and like virility being like the thing to aspire to in your partner. I actually want to flip it on its head and ask you, because I feel like women like me and a lot of our listeners similarly do believe in like this idea of like the softer personality and like a more sensitive guy. And I wanted to ask you, is there a correlation between like being able to be more sensitive as a male and be better in bed?
I think anybody who's more sensitive is definitely going to be better because they understand your needs. They pick up on what your needs are.
Yeah.
And I think that, see, again, better in bed is not about how, as a guy, you can perform.
Yeah.
It's not about how hard you can kind of ram into your partner. Because really, honestly, almost no person enjoys that.
Yeah.
If you're at the receiving end of it. I think that, okay, again, the Kama Sutra says that the idea is that you kiss somebody all over their body, or you try a different position every single day and you watch for the reaction. So if I'm being kissed all over my body, the place that I enjoy it most, my reaction to it is going to be different.
Yeah. Not the ear, basically.
Not the ear. But anybody who's sensitive enough to my needs or understanding that that's what I want is going to pick up where my reactions change. They're going to then focus a little bit on that. They're going to come back with a little bit more understanding on that. I think that's what makes you a better lover.
Mm.
Just understanding what your partner needs. And there's an ancient text, again, can't really date it, 6th, 7th century. It's called the Amaru Shatak, in which a particular person, in order to respond to a debate on human sexuality, he's celibate, he's never had sex before, and he's losing in this debate because he's debating against a woman.
Okay.
And so he, with his magical powers, he's a great sage, enters the body of this king who has a harem. And for 100 days, he has sex with 100 different women. And I love this idea that it goes for 100 days with 100 different. It's not just, yeah, I had sex and now I know everything about it.
Mm.
And he comes away saying that every single woman is different in how she responds to pleasure.
Mm.
She's different on every day. Not just that every individual is different, but that every woman is different on every single day.
Mm.
One day her pleasure is wild and excited. One day it's mellow. One day she brings a sort of sadness almost to that intimacy. That's how she's feeling.
Yeah.
One day it's a little bit like, nah, I could take it or leave it. That's fine. I just want to lie back and enjoy it. There is just so much we as human beings have within us. We understand at every other level that today I want to have Chinese food, but tomorrow I want to have dosa. And today I really feel like having something sweet. And tomorrow I feel like having something really spicy. And you understand that your moods are so variable and they can shift. And there are little nuances sometimes in your shift of the mood. One day you want tofu, one day you want paneer.
Yeah.
But when it comes to sex, we kind of have this, it's like a blanket. Like, this is sex. There should be nothing more to that.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that anybody who's sensitive is automatically has a better chance of being a better lover.
Regardless of their anatomy?
Regardless of their anatomy. So I think that, again, this has been fed to us about the body shape. Let's start with the penis sizes. Okay, this thing that you see on porn is like totally unreal. 2% of the men in this world have penises of that size. The average penis, which is 70 to 75% of men, is so the average penis size is between 4.5 to 6.25 inches. That's the average length. This also ties into the comfort levels of 70 to 75% women. So for most women, if it was huge, it's painful and uncomfortable.
Yeah.
If it was very, very small, it is not always going to lead to satisfaction. So the average size penis is actually what the average person is looking for.
Yeah.
Most people are looking for. Now, it's not even there are, of course, special positions that have been listed for if you're very big or if you're very small to try and help you. But the Kama Sutra also carries on to talk about how many other things go into the giving of pleasure. Yes, the idea of the penetration, the friction is pleasurable, not necessarily the way to orgasm for most women.
Yeah.
I am kind of going binary over here. I'm sorry. Will you forgive me? I'm not kind of, I'm saying man and woman.
Yeah.
But that's not because I'm not conscious of the fact that we have non-binary members in society. It's just that the Kama Sutra talks about man and woman.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of reiterating that for that purpose. So it says that the text says that a woman should be brought to pleasure twice before you even penetrate her. So she should be brought to orgasm twice through other means before you penetrate her. Because a lot of women will not achieve orgasm through penetration.
Yeah.
So it is really important that the satisfaction should be there. And much like the poor emperor who was having to satisfy 120 women, there are lots of different ways that you can do it, where you can use fingers. And it's not just that, oh, it's one finger or two fingers. There is an entire chapter on the use of the fingers. So what combination of fingers, what shape you should make with your fingers before you pleasure the person, how you should move your fingers when they're inside a vagina. Everything from keeping them together. Let's say if it's this, it says that every finger has its own energy: air, water, fire, wind, earth. And so the combination in any combo changes the energy
That's so interesting.
that you bring to it. And also, if I have my fingers like this, it changes the shape of it if I do this.
Okay.
So what you access inside a vagina when I have this, as opposed to this, is different. Then there's ones where you would put your fingers in and do this inside.
Okay.
And so on. So there's a lot of stuff over there. Yeah, there's a whole science behind it. It also says that if for any reason, like if you have Peyronie's disease or other medical issues, there are prosthetics that you can wear for sex, which means you strap them on and you can then have sex with feeling like you're actually doing it, which is good for the confidence of both people. Plus, it's pleasurable. And of course, there are different positions that enable it as well for different sizes. So yeah, I think that, again, I had this, which I've been meaning to respond to. This guy said, my penis is 8 inches long. Why can't I get a woman to have sex with me? Like, because we have sex with a person, not just a penis. I just think that with everything, you have to learn how to do it right.
Yeah. And there is hope. There's no shame.
God knows there's no shame because we're all different. It's like if I do yoga. There was a time when you did yoga and there was somebody next to you who was doing it amazingly and you couldn't do it.
I've had that.
Yeah. And then you're like, oh my God, they do it so well. I'm not coming back to this class.
Yeah.
And it's taken a long time for us to understand, well, we're all at different levels. It's okay. They can do this. I can't.
Yeah.
I will do yoga to whatever my capacity is. It's the same with sex. We forget it's not it's not an exam. It's for pleasure.
Yeah. It's for you.
Yeah. And it should be joyous and fun. So do it in whichever way it gives you joy rather than worrying what your neighbor is doing.
Yeah. God, we're so lucky to have you, Seema. Touching on what you talked about with kind of non-binary individuals and same-sex relationships, which is something that we've not really touched on. And I've been thinking about it the whole episode and I was like, I don't know where to ask this question, but do you get a lot of questions around that as well? And do you think there's, an equal amount of education out there? Like obviously with the Kama Sutra, you said it's based on
it's more
heterosexual relationships. But is there kind of anything out there for same-sex relationships or non-binary people?
So the education for same-sex relationships is building, but there's very little out there. And I think that the biggest problem is that because it's still a lot of people still trying to come out, a lot of people are still trying to own it. There isn't enough education on it. There isn't even enough, let's say, visible stuff on it, visual stuff.
Yeah.
So I find that it's really hard also for a lot of people to understand what it even looks like. So if I am gay and I want to be with somebody else, and there isn't even, enough knowledge out there to explain to me that being with another woman, how should I be flirting? Or when I'm kissing her, how does that look? We have this idea in our head of how it looks if there is a heteronormative kiss. How does it look when you're with a same-sex partner? If you are going through a certain position, which has been described as man-woman, and there are lots of positions like that, which you can take to same-sex couples as well. How does it look when you perform those? How does your movement change? We were talking about how when the man, if the woman is on top and you're not supposed to be bouncing. So at the moment, that's our thing. Okay, you're supposed to be bouncing. Then you have sex educators like me coming in and saying, actually, no, you're supposed to be grinding. You're only supposed to move your hips, so you're not bouncing up and down from your knees. You're using your hips, which means you're slightly back and forth, slightly round and round. You're not supposed to move the upper part of your body. You're going through all of this, right? You're trying to explain this to people.
Yeah.
So if it's a situation where you are in penetrative sex, that you understand how the movement should be so that you get full pleasure out of this.
Yeah.
Now, if there are two men doing this or two women doing this, how should their movement be to ensure that they're getting their pleasure? There's just very little. And most of the people who are talking about it are also very young. They too are still exploring and experimenting. So who's teaching whom and how?
Yeah. I heard through, I guess, my years of just learning about our culture a bit more, I think one thing that the LGBTQ plus community speak about quite a bit especially in South Asian kind of cultures, is that there is a lot in our ancient scriptures around, being non-binary. There were, a lot of personalities and individuals in those scriptures. But my understanding is some of that was eradicated. There's a lot of stuff we've lost from our old scriptures. So is there anything you could comment on?
We have lost a lot. A
Mm.
lot of it was destroyed because at some point, again, during colonial rule, there were lots of things that the British didn't think was okay for
Yeah.
translation. So that was lost. But also, even though you have the non-binary characters in our stories, the description of their lovemaking is not there.
Yeah.
That's what I mean. So even though you have the lyricism around their lovemaking, you talk about their feelings, you talk about, the beauty that they see in each other, you talk about the experience that in their mind, the elevation of the senses. We're not talking about the physical experience of what they should be doing, their movement.
Yeah.
I've discovered, for instance, the Kama Sutra doesn't talk about the act of sex. So it talks about the positions, but it doesn't tell you what your movements should be. And it's taken many, many years of trying to find the right translations, or trying to find the meanings of the metaphors to understand what it is that's hidden. So, for instance, it says that if the woman is very, very tight and the man is really big, the penis is very big, then, and we're constantly being told this, ideally the woman should be underneath, legs spread as wide open as possible, thighs as upright as possible, maybe even put a little pillow under the hips to elevate that so that penetration becomes easier. Now, the Kama Sutra actually says that in that position, if you've got a pillow underneath there, etc., your feet should be here on the man's shoulders. In the man's underarms, actually, it says. So your heel should be in the underarms. And that's not just as a position like, ooh, let's get experimental. It's because imagine if you as the woman are so tight and you've got this great big thing coming into you, imagine the pain that you're anticipating.
Yeah.
The fear that's going to develop inside you, thinking this great big thing is going to come into me and I'm not going to be able to control it. And you become even tighter.
Yeah.
So the idea of this position is that when you have your feet here, where your heels are in the man's underarms, you have the control to be able to push him back or only let him come in as much as you are comfortable with.
Yeah.
That's the nuance. That's the difference between the position and pleasurable position. We don't get that when they describe the same-sex relationships.
Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah. So again, if you are a very young couple, two guys, let's say, who are having penetrative sex for the first time, what all do you need to do to make sure that you will feel pleasure, not pain? How deep do you go? How do you make sure that it doesn't go any deeper than you need it to go? How do you deal with the sex gas?
Yeah.
Because that's another thing we get so embarrassed about.
That's so true.
Yeah. So yeah, it's just unfortunately that's where I feel that we're
lacking. Thank you for sharing that. I could go on for hours talking to you. It's been fascinating learning about all of these different topics and nuances. But I wanted to ask you a bit about just, I guess, a couple more questions. what is your plan, I guess, for the coming years of, you've been creating all this amazing this world online about, learning about sex and becoming a lot more empowered in your own sensuality, which I've learned a lot from. What's next for Seema?
Okay, so there's a couple of things that I would like to do. One is I really am trying, the whole point of my work is to change the vocabulary. So at the moment, our vocabulary around sex is around pleasure is abusive and it's ugly.
Yeah.
And it's ridden with guilt and sin. It's the trademark is sin. I want to change that to it's a beautiful thing. I want to change this idea that in how we perceive it in our heads or how we talk about it. So just making it possible if the vocabulary is slightly less intimidating, maybe it's something that mums and daughters can talk about, which I think is just very, very important.
So powerful as well.
I think it's so important that mothers should be able to give their daughters advice. And they need to be able to do it in a way that doesn't freak them out and doesn't make the kids kind of go, ew, don't talk
why are you talking about this?
So it needs to be that. And I really, really want to try and work on that. That's what I'm working on. Another thing that I would really like to do, if possible, is to maybe do a text on explaining the positions properly. Trying to explain this idea of, you don't just say that this is what the Kama Sutra says, put one leg over there, put one leg over there, and then go for it. Why do you put that leg there? What good does this do for you? And how will it help you? Just to make it slightly easier so that the next time people have sex, maybe it brings them more pleasure.
I think that's going to remove a lot of misconceptions around the Kama Sutra, which exist. So, yeah. You are so prominent in the online space talking about this. As an Indian woman yourself and someone who comes in with so much grace, like you just ooze grace, I was wondering how you deal with it yourself. I'm sure you get a lot of weird messages, a lot of probably trolling, hatred, all of that stuff being on the internet. How do you protect yourself?
Okay, so I think, yes, anybody who's even in a small way on the internet is going to get trolled. I get more trolling than you can imagine. And it's filthy. It's everything from, she talks so much about sex. She's clearly ready for it. So people sort of saying, I want to have sex with you, to I'm going to rape you, to I'm going to kill you. So we have the whole lot. There's a lot of ugliness out there. I think that when I first started, I too started my social media in lockdown.
Okay.
Before that, I didn't really need the social media.
Yeah.
Because I was doing stuff in person. It was only when lockdown happened, everything came to a halt, and my daughter finished university in the middle of lockdown. And she was sitting at home not doing anything. And she was like, Mom, I think we need to get you on Instagram. And so we started this. I found that when I first started, I used to get really shaken by these comments because I was used to doing this in person where people would pay me a lot of money to come and sit and listen to me and hang on every word. And then there you were doing it for free. And you're getting trolled for it. It just didn't make sense to me. It's taken time to understand it and to be able to sort of shrug it off. There are some things that I still can't shrug off. And there are days when I can't.
Yeah. There
are days when I'm like, yeah, doesn't matter. They're just idiots. And there are days when it annoys the hell out of me. So, yeah, I guess in short, you become more used to it. You do learn to shrug it off because you realize that most of these are very pathetic people with very pathetic ideas, and there's nothing you can do about it. The second thing, and this is really important for everybody out there, it is only 2% of the people following you who are going to be like this.
Yeah.
Most of the people love what you do.
Or they're silent watchers.
They're just silent. They are silent because it's easier for them to be silent. The ones who have a voice are the ones who are vicious.
Yeah.
So you get to see and hear them a lot more. So you have to remind yourself constantly that actually most people are really, really grateful and happy with the work that you're doing.
Mm.
And it's just a very small number who are like this. It's just when you're sitting at home and working and all you see is the messages, it's a bit like demotivating sometimes. But if once you remind yourself that, you're like, yeah, whatever. I also have got to the point where I don't go on social media at all. I will create the work because the content is all mine. I'm very, very particular. Nobody else does that. It then goes to somebody for editing. One of my team do that. I then write a caption, which is then checked by somebody else on my team.
Yeah.
And it is posted by somebody else.
Mm.
And I then don't look at what is happening on social media because when I do, I get really angry sometimes at some of the horrible stuff that's said.
Yeah.
And I found that I may not be reacting to, oh my God, they're saying terrible things about me. But just the fact that some people enjoy being abusive about other people. Let's say there's a certain category of men who love being abusive about women, let's say. Reading their comments, I was getting angry and I found I was just turning into an angry person. I was staying up nights thinking about stuff. I was starting to clench my teeth a lot.
Yeah.
I have so much pain over here, I can't tell you. And I just thought, no, this is not worth it. My work, I have to remind myself, I'm not their mother. It's not my job to change how they think. Not my responsibility.
No.
And it's just my responsibility to bring certain things out, to articulate certain things, to flag them up so that people become aware of it. And for those who want to hear, it is a shoulder to lean on. But that's it. So, I think you have to do a lot of self-teaching.
Yeah. Thank you for doing it and for being that voice. It can't be easy because I cannot imagine what you have faced and what you continue to read at times when you do go on social media. But I do have one final question for you, Seema, which I ask all my guests. What do you have strong game in?
I think just the belief that I am as much a human being as the next person, just the belief that there isn't a divide there that makes me less in any way. The fact that as a 61-year-old, I'm still able to find the courage and the conviction to stand up and say, I want to change this world in whichever small way I can.
That's so powerful. Thank you for sharing that.
Thank you.
And thank you for sharing space with me today. I know you're a very busy lady with all your suitors that apparently...
I know, all these affairs that I'm having. I mean, I need to go back and, hurry up and fit them in.
This has been one of my favorite episodes to date. I feel like I've learned so much, and I really hope that more people get to know about your work, get to learn about these topics through you in a, knowledgeable, safe, healthy environment. And I can't wait to, I guess, see more of you out there, changing the world in your own way. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Brown Game Strong. I really hope you enjoyed it. If you'd like to stick around, then please do hit the subscribe button if you're listening on YouTube. And do give the social links a follow as well. We're on Instagram and on TikTok. If you have any thoughts, feedback, advice, any potential guests that you'd like to hear me speak to, then please do drop a note on either the socials or on browngamestrong@gmail.com. Thank you once again for listening and really appreciate your support.